Okay, hi class. Today should be Wednesday, March 27th. This will be the class lecture for today. I'm going to try and do a couple things a little bit differently. I'm going to see if I can add a few videos to this recording so that you don't just hear me kind of drone on and on and on about the chapter. And I'll also try to put in some cues for Cody to stop the video to allow you guys to work on your virtual stock exchange or talk about current events, things like that. So hopefully the quality of my video increases as we move further along. The last one I did was the very first Zoom video I've ever done. So hopefully it wasn't horrible, but I'm going to try and make it a little bit better this time. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get into the topic today. So, alrighty, go back up to the top here. And this will be chapter 6, economic supply and demand curve, week 2, day 2. Chapter 3 was a pretty big bear to swallow, so I hope you guys got through that. Again, it was really important that you read that entire chapter and understand the supply and demand curves. Chapter 6, we deal a little bit more with utility, which we had talked about before, and its effect on the demand curve. And so we'll go ahead and start talking about that. Again, kicking us off today, we've got current events. And one thing that came up a few weeks ago was that the ex-governor of Colorado, who had just left the governor's spot for Colorado, has announced that he is going to run for president. I put a link in here to his announcement ad. I don't really subscribe to any particular politics. I'm an independent. I don't belong to the Republican or the Democratic Party. So if there's anything in this particular ad that leans one way or the other, I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that up front. But I do think it's something we should take a look at as far as a current event, because we know that the president plays a huge role in economics as far as where the country goes. So I'm going to see if I can play this video real quick, and hopefully it'll show up here on the screen for you. Here, once again. Okay, so I know that there are some politics in that ad. Again, it wasn't my intent to bring that out. I think as economists, we have to remain neutral. But I think it is an important current event to talk about. I told you I'd give you a couple verbal cues. This would be a good point to stop this particular video. So if Cody can stop it and you guys can talk about what other current events are coming up. And feel free to talk about the election. But again, as economists, we should put our political views aside and talk more about what different candidates might bring to the table as far as economic standards. So I'm going to give you guys a second to talk about that. Okay, so you've probably brought me back at this point in time. Again, I've got a couple more videos in here so that I'm not droning on and on and on about the chapter. Hopefully, some of the videos get some of the points across for what we're talking about today and what you've read in chapter 6. So again, I'm going to show this one, and I hope these are coming out correctly. If not, I'll ask that Cody go ahead and copy the hyperlinks into the Chrome there on the computer in the class and maybe play it from there. So let's go ahead and play this one. Okay, so that dealt with the consumer preferences. Also, she talked about kind of inferior goods being the thrift shop, consumer taste, things like that. So I thought that was interesting as far as consumer choice is concerned. So we'll dig a little bit into the chapter here again. This chapter is not as heavy duty as chapter 3 was, but hopefully you're starting to get used to the graphs and kind of how things work in graphs and tables at this point in time. So here we have a graph that depicts the choice between movies and t-shirts. And at certain points along this graph, you have a decision to make. Do you go to so many movies or do you buy so many t-shirts? Now, if you go through the example in the book, what you'll find out is that the person purchasing the movies or the t-shirts finds that his greatest utility is when he purchases like the one t-shirt and then the so many movies. So point S right here. So he can go to 6 movies with one t-shirt, and that overall is his greatest utility or greatest satisfaction with his purchases. The way you find that out is marginal utility. So the change in total utility over the change in quantity. The law of diminishing marginal utility. Marginal utility diminishes as each additional unit is consumed, which means that each subsequent unit of good consumed provides less utility. I provided an example of this in the discussion this week with cheesecake. That's how I've always remembered this. And, the idea that you have that first piece of cheesecake and it tastes great, it's the best thing ever. And then you have that second piece and it tastes pretty good. It still tasted really good, but not quite as good as that first piece. And by the time you're eating this cheesecake in one sitting, you've decided you're going to eat the entire cheesecake. You get to that 5th slice and you're about to throw up. So the utility has almost gone out the window at that point in time. So with each additional unit, you get a little bit less satisfaction, a little bit less utility from that. There's also a dollar equation to this. The marginal utility per dollar is the amount of additional utility you receive given the price of the product or service. So depending on the price, you may gain or lose some marginal utility with that particular product or service. The rule for maximizing utility, so this is a formula right here. For maximizing utility, you can find this in the chapter as well with some examples. But if you just plug in, the number of items for one item, the number of items for another, and then your particular price, you divide them out. When they're equal, that's when you gain the greatest amount of utility. So you can play around with the formula if you'd like. Take a look at the example in the book. The income effect on consumer choices. So there's an example again in the chapter, so make sure you read the chapter about a lady that's purchasing concert tickets as opposed to overnight stays. And in the beginning, she has $1,000 to work with. So that would be our first line here. So she could go, I think the concert's $50 and the overnight stays are $200. So she could purchase as many as $250 concert tickets, and that would be right here on the line. Or she could stay 5 nights at a bed and breakfast at $200 a night, and that takes up her $1,000 there. We find out that the maximum utility that she receives would be, it looks like about 3 overnight stays and about, it looks like 8 concert tickets at this point. But then what happens is that she gets an extra $1,000 in income that she can use for movie tickets and overnight stays. So it shifts that curve out here to this point. And then we see different points of where her utility might lie. I believe at this point, if you come through up here, you're at about 29 concerts and still the 3 overnight stays, and then you can kind of move to different points along that shifted curve to see what the different combinations would be. I think at point in right here, they've got 5 overnight stays and 20 concert tickets would use that $2,000. So that's the income effect on consumer choices. The art of choosing. So we're gonna watch another video real quick. Again, I wanted to mix it up a little bit this time and give you guys some different things to take a look at. Obviously, if it's time for a break, go ahead and stop now, and then you can come back and watch this. Or at any point during this, Cody can feel free to stop the presentation, and you guys can take a break. But I'm going to put this video on real quick. Okay, so that was pretty interesting because it dealt with a lot of different things as far as consumer choice goes. We had the idea of different cultures not having the ability to choose because they come from, remember, the command economy, or what would be considered a communist economy, where there may only be one choice. And so we learned how the older generation didn't know how to deal with that. So it's kind of interesting to hear that perspective. So how price changes affect consumer choices. And again, this is a consumer choice graph. It's not a supply and demand graph. But what it shows us is that, okay, we've got cameras over here, we've got baseball bats over here. Chances are, you know, if you have a camera or two, you're not going to buy a bunch of cameras. Therefore, you know, we see that the change in price doesn't affect the number of cameras that you're going to purchase as much as it's going to affect a shift in the number of baseball bats that you might purchase. So I think in this case, this is a price change in baseball bats where the price increased, therefore the curve shifts backwards. So you'll buy fewer baseball bats, but you can see that it doesn't affect the number of cameras that you're going to purchase quite as much because you may not need as many cameras as you need baseball bats. Foundations of a curve, an example in housing. So what happens here is we've got an original housing price at P0, which is your first line right here. And as your budget gets constrained, say that your income goes down, the shift in housing is going to go backwards. So that as an economy's income is lowered, therefore all of the households within the economy, the fewer and fewer and fewer houses people are going to purchase. But houses are a very expensive commodity, so it's going to be greatly affected by income. Everything else, like your groceries and everything else, is quite a bit less affected by that decrease in income. Yes, you might shift from name brand goods to generic goods. Chances are you're still going to need a car, so you're still going to need to pay for it. But that demand in housing is going to move backwards with a decrease in income. Labor versus leisure choices. And so this is a really interesting concept. You have a choice here as far as how much time do you want to spend working and how much time do you want to spend like taking time off or time off on the weekends, or do you get a second job? The book gives a really great example. But with the number of hours available, are you going to work more? Or are you going to work less? It showed in the book also different countries, which was real interesting. The two countries that tend to work the most are the United States and Japan at over 1,900 hours a year. And then you move into some European countries where they work about 6 weeks less per year than the Americans do. They also have a much higher tax rate, but a lot of their services are covered through the government, so they don't worry about a lot of things like Americans do. But it also talks about really wealthy people. So if you're a dentist or you're a doctor and your income is, you know, getting into that $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year range, you'll tend to work less. Even though you can make more money by working more, you have everything, so therefore you're going to work a little bit less. You're going to take an extra day off and things like that. So it's an interesting concept, the labor and leisure choices. So review that in the chapter as well. And that also deals with the backward bending supply curve of labor. So higher wages at one point in time will have people work more hours. So if you're going to make more money, you're going to want to work more hours to make more money. But we reach a point with wages where that kind of levels out. And then actually when the wages get so high, what will happen is people will cut back on the amount that they're working. Basically, again, because they have everything that they need and what they really want is more time off. Okay. trying to remember here what we were doing. Oh, future consumption. So this has to do with the idea of a retirement account. And this is a hard concept, especially if you're younger and you haven't set up a retirement account yet. But it deals with, okay, would you rather have your money now or in the future? And so you have a choice. The more money you put aside now, the higher your income will be in the future. The more money you spend now, the lower your retirement is going to be in the future. So you kind of have to make that decision. Again, it went through and it talked about different countries and how much they saved. The United States, I think it said the average person saved about 6% of their income towards retirement, whereas in some countries, like some of the European countries, they'll save up in excess of 30%. So they say if you save about 22% of your income from the age of 18, you can retire, a multimillionaire by the time you reach 55, if you put that money into stocks and into retirement accounts. So it's about 22% of your income starting at the age of 18. Obviously, the earlier you start, the more money you're going to make through compounding interest. So one more video. I think that's going to be the last one for the day. I'm going to put that up. Again, if you need to take a break, feel free to do that. You can stop it at this point in time. But I'm going to put this last video in for us. Okay, so that was a talk that talked a little bit about the variables of choice, and you can kind of correlate that with marginal utility. So, you know, do you get more utility out of Prego, or do you get more utility out of Ragu? And why is it good to have those types of choices? So behavioral economics seeks to enrich the understanding of decision making by integrating the insights of psychology into economics. That's kind of what that video was about. Okay, so that wraps it up for the chapter review today. This is the time when Cody should probably go ahead and stop this video and let you guys work on your virtual stock markets. Once you guys are set with that, remember to send me a screenshot of your portfolio to my email address. That'll give you attendance for today. And following that, feel free to complete the in-class quiz, work together. Keep those quizzes because they will help you with your weekly assessment. Thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday.